Welcome back to Mind Pump TV, guys. I'm your host, Danny Matranga. I'm super pumped to show you one of my favorite protocols for driving growth in the arms. But before we get into that, I kind of got to break down the concept we're going to be talking about today, and that's blood flow restriction training, or BFR. BFR has been around forever. It originated in Japan, and it went by the name of Katsu training. Now, Katsu training, or BFR, works on the premise of driving metabolic stress at the level of the muscle cell. Now, remember, we have three primary drivers of muscle growth: mechanical tension, muscle damage, and metabolic stress. Now, where BFR works in a super unique way is it takes the volume and turns it up to 10 on that metabolic stress component. What you do when you do BFR is you literally restrict blood flow, or what we would call venous return of blood from the working muscle back to the heart. You see, when you work out, you start to develop a lot of metabolite buildup in the working muscle. So for example, if it's my biceps, each rep I do, I'm gonna start to have some hydrogen ions, some creatine phosphate, some inorganic phosphates. All these different things are gonna start to pool. Lactate, for example, even growth hormone will start to pool in the muscle. And it's the blood's job to come through, clean that up, take it back to the heart, and kind of purify it so oxygen-rich blood can start flowing back again. Now, what makes BFR really cool is all that stuff that pools in the muscle is highly anabolic in certain settings. So by trapping it using something like a BFR cuff, you literally bathe that muscle, and you're able to supply it with a highly metabolically stressful environment that could drive growth with very little to no load. So that's why it's very popular, especially in the medical and therapeutic field when you're working with populations that might have a joint or a legitimate local muscle issue. And it's been utilized by bodybuilders pretty regularly for the last couple decades as a means to driving growth in flexion and extension joints like the arms and the legs. So let me show you my favorite one for bis and tris. Let's get into it. All right, guys, so to perform blood flow restriction, again, we need to make sure we minimize venous outflow from that working muscle. So you need something like this. These are just some basic run-of-the-mill blood flow restriction cuffs that you can get on Amazon for like 20 bucks. Now, really simple setup here. These are Velcro. Some work on a little bit of like an open-closed cinching basis. Some people use tourniquets or knee wraps. What we want to do is go right up as far as we can to that bicep insertion here. And we want to tighten this up to a point where we have a perceived like 7 out of 10 tightness. That seems to be the generally recommended amount. So you're going to work yourself to a place where you think you've got about a 7 out of 10 tightness on both arms. Again, make sure that it's equal. Now what this is going to do is this is going to make sure I get very little venous outflow out of the bicep and tricep back up to the heart while I'm working. Again, I mentioned earlier, this does work really well for the quads and hamstrings, and you would go up here close to the groin. You can do it for delts and you can really play with it, but it seems, in my opinion, to work best for flexion and extension exercise. So once you've cut off venous outflow, the name of the game is to build up metabolic stress in that working tissue. And one thing with BFR is it's excruciatingly painful and quite difficult if done properly. So you don't need to use much weight at all. I'm using 40 pounds on each of these cable stacks, which is much less than I could potentially do for, say, a 1 rep max. Not that anybody would 1 rep max a cable, but you get what I'm saying. I would recommend starting somewhere between 15 to 30% of 1 rep max for this. Now, the protocol is very simple. You have a 30 rep set of the tricep movement and a 30 rep set of the bicep movement, followed by a subsequent 3-set superset of 15. So it's 30, 30, 15, 15, 15, 15, 15, and 15. Now, if at any point you feel like you're getting very hypoxic, you're starting to feel like excruciating levels of pain, feel free to take the tourniquets off. You're building your capacity up to be able to handle that. But again, BFR in most cases and for most populations is quite safe. So, right into movement 1 is tricep extension. I'm working on getting about 30 repetitions. You can use a rope, you can use a V-bar, you can use a straight bar. I really like this spreader bar. And I'm working my way towards 30. This first set is almost nothing. It really kind of feels like you're not doing much. You're just getting those muscles to fire, and you're kind of starting the beginning process of metabolite accumulation. So we'll say that's 30 for the sake of time. I then immediately go into 30 on my next exercise. And what I'm doing here is, again, focusing on that pump, really trying to keep pretty good technique. I understand that it's probably not going to be perfect. Say that's 30 as well. Your technique might give a little bit, especially as you fatigue, which is another reason why working with these really small loads is pretty nice. So another really cool benefit of BFR is as those metabolites accumulate and as the set goes on, you actually work up a pretty considerable volume on that working muscle tissue. So you'll actually notice that the contraction of the bicep and the tricep get a lot harder and they get a lot more powerful, and you really start to feel literally every muscle fiber beginning to work with 40 pounds, which is relatively rare, right? Generally speaking, we need to get a very substantial load going to get optimal muscle fiber and optimal motor unit recruitment. This is not the case. So I can literally feel it right now. I'm starting to see some slight discoloration at the arm. I'm feeling that hypoxic environment at the bicep and tricep. The pump is getting pretty nasty. So we'll cut it there just for the sake of the video. Now, after you finish the protocol, you'll actually see on the arm where that band was at. You get a little bit of a pump locally at that bicep, and then I like to just kind of put my hands overhead to allow a venous return back to the heart. One round of BFR, 15 or 30, 30, 15, 15, 15, 15 should be more than enough for you guys. Maybe once per week on your first week, putting that towards the end of an upper body day. You could work your way up to 2 BFR sessions per week if you again have time and capacity to do so. It's quite difficult, but if you have elbow pain, you have a hard time curling or extending significant weights, or you're just looking to try something new, I think you might find BFR to be quite effective. One last tip, guys, BFR is not a standalone protocol for training any muscle group. You still need to employ the central tenet of progressive overload, and generally getting stronger and lifting more weights with musculature is going to be a good way to get it to grow. BFR is just a nice supplement to these things, especially in a long-term progressive training protocol where you don't train heavy all the time. If you've tried BFR, make sure you comment below. Let me know what muscles you've tried it on, if you liked it, if you saw good results. If you haven't tried it, I'd be excited to hear what you think about it. And if you liked the video, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Have a good one.